Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Dan, for setting up this webinar this morning. As Dan mentioned, the webinar is to provide information on the special program to support institutional strengthening at the national level for implementation of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, Minamata Convention, and the strategic approach to international chemicals management. The 27th session of the Governing Council Global Ministerial Environment Forum, in its decision 27/12, Section 8 on chemicals and waste management, invited governments to consider establishing through an existing institution a special program funded by voluntary contributions to support institutional strengthening at the national level for the implementation of the BRS conventions, the then future Minamata Convention, and the strategic approach to international chemicals management. The Governing Council requested the Executive Director of UNEP to facilitate and support a country-led meeting of governments and regional economic integration organizations and other relevant stakeholders. The meeting was held in Bangkok from the 27th to 30th of August 2013 to discuss the terms of reference for the special program. Subsequently, at the first session of the United Nations Environment Assembly, in its Resolution 1/5, welcomed an integrated approach to address the financing of the sound management of chemicals and waste, and underscored that the three components of an integrated approach, mainstreaming, industry involvement, and dedicated external finance, are mutually reinforcing and are important for the financing of the sound management of chemicals and waste at all levels. Furthermore, UNEA 1 adopted the terms of reference for a special program, again, to be funded by voluntary contributions and to support institutional strengthening at the national level to enhance the implementation of the BRS conventions, the Minamata Convention, and SAICM. The special program terms of reference defined institutional strengthening as enhancing the sustainable institutional capacity of governments to develop, adopt, monitor, and enforce policy, legislation, and regulation, as well as gain access to financial and other resources to ensure sound chemicals and waste management throughout the life cycle. A number of expected outcomes were stipulated in the terms of reference, including the development and monitoring of implementation of national policy, strategies, programs, and legislation, mainstreaming of chemicals and waste, sound management into national development plans, national budgets, policies, legislation, and implementation frameworks, promotion of the effective implementation of the BRS and Minamata Conventions and SAICM, and promotion of cooperative and coordinated implementation of the instruments at the national level. In addition, the terms of reference provide for the scope of the special program, noting that the program should avoid duplication and proliferation of funding mechanisms in associated administration and should fund activities that fall outside of the mandate of the Global Environment Facility. And a number of activities stipulated in the terms of reference include as follows: identification of national institutional capacity, weaknesses, gaps, and needs, strengthening of institutional capacity to plan, develop, undertake, monitor, and coordinate the implementation of policy, strategies, and national programs for the sound management of chemicals and waste, promoting an enabling environment to foster the ratification of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions and the Minamata Convention, enable design and operation of institutional structures dedicated to the promotion of sound management of chemicals and waste throughout the life cycle, and strengthen institutional capacity to promote measures to support all aspects of sound management of chemicals and waste, including more specifically nationally identified thematic areas covered by the instrument. UNEA 1, in its Resolution 1/5, requested the Executive Director of UNEP, consistent with the terms of reference for the Special Program, to establish and administer the Special Program Trust Fund and to provide a Secretariat to deliver administrative support to the program. In response to this request, the Executive Director provides the Secretariat of the Special Program, which is hosted within UNEP's Chemicals and Waste branch in DTIE. The Special Program Trust Fund has also been formally established. The Trust Fund will be open for contributions and applications for 7 years. To date, approximately $14 million has been pledged and contributed to the Trust Fund from the governments of Austria, the European Union, the government of Finland, the government of Germany, government of Sweden, government of the Netherlands, and the government of the United States. UNEA Resolution 1/5 also encouraged governments in a position to do so, as well as private sector, including industry, foundations, other non-governmental organizations, and other stakeholders to mobilize financial resources for the effective establishment and quick start implementation of the special program. The terms of reference of the special program stipulate that an executive board will be the decision-making board and oversee the special program with support of a secretariat. The executive board has now been established. The representatives from recipient countries are as follows: Kenya representing Africa, Brazil and Argentina representing Latin America and the Caribbean, sharing the 2-year term. Former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia representing the Central Eastern Europe. Yemen representing least developing countries and small island developing states. And the country to represent Asia and the Pacific is still to be decided. The donor representatives on the executive board are the European Union, Finland, Germany, Sweden, and the United States. In addition, the executive secretaries of the Secretariat of the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions and the Minamata Convention, the coordinator of SICAM, and the Secretariat of the GEF, as well as representatives of governments and regional economic integration organizations, any implementing agencies, and one representative each of the bureaus of the governing bodies of the instruments may participate at their own expense as observers to meetings of the executive board. In accordance with the terms of reference, Letizia de Carvalho of Brazil and Mr. Nico Uro of Finland were elected co-chairs of the executive board, representing a recipient country and a donor country respectively. The terms of reference stipulated that the mandate and functions of the board would be as follows. They would meet on a yearly basis and take decisions by consensus wherever possible. Further develop its rules of procedure at its first meeting, and take operational decisions regarding the functioning of the special program, including the approval of applications for funding and endorsement of procedures for application, assessment, reporting, and evaluation. The board will provide operational guidance on implementation of the special program and provide advice on other matters as required. So the first meeting of the board was held from the 2nd to the 3rd of February 2016, and significant progress was made with agreement reached on the rules of procedure for the operations of their board, the application guidelines, and application forms. The board considered that the project funding levels and agreed that the projects would have the following funding range: $50,000 to $250,000 with a maximum of $500,000 for a more comprehensive project on institutional strengthening. The terms of project duration, the board agreed that the maximum duration of the project would be for 3 years and would start upon signature of agreement between the Secretariat of the Special Program and the relevant government entity. Finally, the board agreed that the first round of applications would be launched on the 4th of April 2016 as a pilot phase to enable the program to be up and running as soon as possible. Lessons learned from this pilot phase would subsequently be reflected in revised guidelines and application procedures. According to the terms of reference, the eligibility criteria to receive funding from the special program is as follows. Support from the special program will be available for developing countries, taking into account the special needs of least developing countries and small island developing states, and for countries with economies in transition, with priority given to those with least capacity. Applicants would be eligible if they are party to one of the relevant conventions or have demonstrated that they are in the process of preparing for ratification of any one of the conventions. Applications will include identification of the associated domestic measures to be taken to ensure that national institutional capacity supported by the special program is sustainable in the long run. A list of criteria was developed to support the Executive Board to appraise and approve projects, and it was agreed that these criteria would include the following, taking into account that the assessment of the information provided by the applicant would have to be done on a case-by-case basis. So these include proposal of measures within the objective of the special program, sustainability of the project outcomes, contribution of resources equal to the value of at least 25% of the total allocation requested in the application, noting that in accordance with the terms of reference, the board may reduce that percentage commensurate with consideration of the specific national circumstances, capacity constraints, gaps, and needs of the applicant. Performance targets to measure progress achieved by the special program, identification of mainstreaming of sand management of chemicals in various sectors, participation and commitment of relevant actors and sectors, including agriculture, environment, health, labor, industry, and other sectors in the implementation of measures proposed. Project intervention on more than one instrument, and identification of the conventions to which the applicant country is a party and or actual participation in SAICM. As I mentioned earlier, the board will use these criteria to take into account that the assessment of the information provided by the applicant would have to be done on a case-by-case basis. In addition, other considerations discussed by the board, which could be considered during the appraisal phase, taking into account that the assessment of the information, again, would be done in line with the objective of the special program, include determination of cumulative allocations to a country based on the contributions received and the needs expressed in the application submitted. Account should be taken of reports on earlier projects involving countries applying for a second time, and this, of course, will be adopted when we do the second call for applications and subsequent call for applications. It may be sought that to avoid duplication of projects in the same country. However, consideration may be given towards replicating successful projects for other countries. Whether the project promotes enhanced coordination and cooperation at the national level to implement BRS conventions, the Minamata Convention, and SAICM. Whether the project builds upon previous initiatives and institutional mechanisms already established. Whether the project proposes regional activities, provided that these are in line with the objective of the special program, and gender mainstreaming and other considerations. So the launch of the first call of applications took place on the 5th of April, and the deadline for applications is the 4th of July 2016. Further information on the special program calls for application can be found on the special program website, and the website address is provided on the screen. The application documents are also available, and these include the project application guidelines, the Form 1, which is the project summary, Project Form 2, which is the full project proposal, and Project Form 3, project budget. For those colleagues who have been involved in the Quick Start program of SAICM, you will see that the forms have been adapted from the Quick Start program process, and so there is similarities there and a few differences, of course. In terms of the next steps for the first round of applications, the Secretariat upon receipt of the application package, will acknowledge receipt no later than 1 week of receipt. So if the deadline of applications is the 4th of July, say we receive applications even prior to the 4th of July, within 1 week, the Secretariat will acknowledge receipt. The application then will be screened by the Special Program Secretariat to make sure it is complete and eligible for support. Once screened by the Secretariat, the applicant will be informed if the application is considered complete and eligible ad interim and can be reviewed by the Executive Board. During the screening process, the Secretariat may request for additional information or clarification from the applicant in order to facilitate the eligibility process. The Secretariat will then submit the complete and eligible proposals to the Executive Board to the annual meeting for review and consideration. The second meeting of the Board is scheduled to take place in October 2016. The applicant will then be notified in writing by the Secretariat of the Board's decision. Kindly note that until the Board meets in October 2016, the Secretariat will not be in a position to provide any updates on approval of applications. Between October and December 2016, implementation arrangements will be put in place between the Secretariat of the Special Program and the government entity, with the view of starting implementation of the project in early 2017. Further resources can be found on the Special Program website, including the terms of reference, governance arrangements, all the application forms, and we also have a dedicated email where you can send any questions, special/program.chemicals@unep.org. I think I will stop there. I do have a few more slides which actually go through the application form. Of course, this will be provided to you following this webinar, but maybe I could first take a few questions, and if I feel that the questions require some further detail on the application forms, I can go through them in a little bit more detail. So thank you, and let's take some questions for now. One other point I wanted to raise is that we also have colleagues here from the Secretariats of the BRS Convention. We have Frank Moser, and we have Mohammed Amutola from the SAICOM Secretariat. So if there are any questions directed to them, they would be happy to provide any responses or clarifications as required. Thank you. So we have a question from Nduzi Lamini. I hope I got your name right. Apologies if I say it incorrectly. And he's asking us to clarify on the 25% co-funding. What does that entail? So the terms of reference stipulate that one of the criteria for the special program applications, and you will also see this on the Form 1 as well as Form 2, requesting to provide 25% of the total allocation requested in the application. This can come in the form of staff time within the government entity that's making the application. It can come in terms of operational, your operations, whether it's provision of overhead costs that the government wants to put forward. It can come in the form of cash contribution, perhaps if there is an ongoing project and that project would like to be used to, well, the special program would be used to enhance the other project, so that could be included as the 25%. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, that in accordance with the terms of reference, the board may reduce that percentage commensurate with considerations of the national circumstances, capacity constraints, gaps, and needs of the applicant. But again, this would be a board decision that would be taken in October. And if a case is made, the board may consider a deduction of this percentage or a waiver of the percentage. I hope that answers your question, Nduduzi. Are there any other questions? I see one right here. So what is the minimum and maximum duration for a project to be implemented? This is a question from Ronnie Fraser-Williams. The board agreed that there would be a maximum of 3 years duration for a project. They did not actually talk about or discuss a minimum period, but I would imagine if based on the Quick Start Program, SICAM process, governments and the evaluation that was undertaken felt that the 2 years of the Quick Start Program was too short. And so this is why the board discussed and agreed on a 3-year project implementation. However, I guess if it is a short, quick activity that the government would like to undertake to support institutional strengthening at the national level, it could be that a project that is 1 year or 2 years would also be acceptable. But again, this is a board's decision. They would have to assess based on the application and when they sit and discuss in October. So we have another question from Ahmed Gada. Should a country be a party in Minamata Convention to be eligible for the program? In accordance with the terms of reference, it stipulates that eligible countries are those if they are party to any one of the relevant conventions, meaning party to the Basel, Rotterdam, or Stockholm Convention, or the Minamata Convention, or have demonstrated that they are in the process of preparing for ratification of any one of the conventions. So the quick answer is that it is not necessary that you have to be party in Minamata Convention to be eligible to the program. You can also be party to Stockholm, Basel, or Rotterdam Conventions, or you are demonstrating that you are in the process of preparing for ratification for any of the 4 conventions of the special program. Is there any further questions on the terms of reference or regarding the process for application? I'm not sure if you would like me to walk through the forms. Okay, well, thanks, Ronnie, for suggesting that I go through the forms. If you just bear with me for a second, I'll just get the slides back up. Voila. So application form 1, which as I mentioned is the summary form. This first page, of course, is for internal use, where we put a project number upon receipt. We then have the project proposal summary. So we'd like here the project title, the duration in months, and again, this is the list of the eligibility criteria that I mentioned earlier, whether you're a developing country, least developing country, SIDS, or a country and economy in transition, if your country is party to any of the 4 conventions, or if your country is preparing for ratification for any of the 4 conventions. And Section C here is an open-ended question, so we would like to get information on identification of associated domestic measures to be taken to ensure that the national institutional capacity in your program is sustainable in the long run. On this slide, we have a short section to provide an executive summary, approximately 250 words. So this really has to showcase what the project objectives are and provides a little bit more information on how the outcomes are in line with the special program terms of reference. The funding summary, again, here we have the value of resources contributed by the beneficiary country. This is in line with what I said earlier about the 25% co-funding. Here we have the second line allows you to put a maximum of 250,000, noting, of course, that the board agreed if the project is can demonstrate that it's got a more comprehensive project on institutional strengthening, then they would approve a budget of $500,000. We then have a section here in the funding summary on amount requested from other sources, and then we have the total project funding. In terms of funding sources, we also have the section on whether the project has or the activities proposed previously have been submitted for funding, and what other in-kind contributions have been provided, and also viability of the project from other funding sources. In Section 2, we ask for contact details of the applicant, noting that this is a direct access funding resource, so it should be requested from the government entity. We also have sections on who the implementing organization will be, so the government could provide information if it is separate from that ministry or that department, if it's another department going to undertake the activities, so they would include who the project implementing organization is. And then we also have then Section 2.3 on the project partners. And if you have multiple project partners, then you can cut and paste this section as appropriate. Sorry, I think this was a repeat of the first one. The form is also asking to provide information on independent monitoring and evaluation of the project. So on the organization that's independent, if you can provide the details of the titles and contact details, as well as a financial audit information, again, name of the organization and the contact details. This is the application checklist. So as long as we have a complete and signed application form 1, complete application form 2, complete application form 3, which is the project budget, letters of support from the different project partners as appropriate, and a letter from the organization institution confirming its role of implementation of the project. And finally, the sources of financing, proof of funding from beneficiary country and other sponsors. So these documentation will be included in the project application, and the checklist then will be complete. And finally, this is the endorsement and certification of the project proposal. So we'd like the official focal point. And again, it's left a little bit open. It could be your UNEP focal point, or the relevant, if the project is looking at BRS projects, for example, the relevant focal point as appropriate, and this final signature. In terms of Form 2, which you have the project description, this again is a bit more detailed into the information that's required of the project. Here, of course, the first page will just provide a little bit of the summary, so it would be a cut and paste job pretty much from the application form 1. Here we have now the information of the project background. As you will see, we have information on whether the relevant project if you've had previous experience, and we'd like you to list all of the different projects that have been undertaken in terms of sand management of chemicals over the past 7 years that are currently being implemented or will be implemented into the future. Here we have indication of projects, how much funding was received, dates of implementation, links with the special program, achievement, and lessons learned. So this is more of an open-ended question, and we'd like you to provide very brief, but your country's overall approach to strengthening institutional capacity in sound management of chemicals and waste. Section 1.7 then provides space to give information on the project overall objective and justification. As you will notice, the 7 or 8 areas where the terms of reference stipulate this is the expected outcome of the project. So we'd like you to then spell out how your project would be in line with the terms of reference of the special program, in what areas, etc. We then have the log frame where we would like you to explain how the project addresses institutional strengthening at the national level, the project outcome, the outputs, its milestones, indicators, means of verification, etc. And this is a typical log frame that you would find in most project documents. In terms of project assumptions, we provide space also to list the factors and conditions that are likely to affect a successful implementation of the project, whether it's institutional, financial, administrative, technical, or political. And also what measures that you would put in place to reduce these risks. We have then section 1.10, which provides a table to include a project work plan. This again is done on a 3-monthly basis to up to a 3-year time frame, and we then also have an evaluation plan where we'd like you to indicate how the project will be evaluated, including also selection of performance indicators and targets, which also relate back to the log frame. This was the list of criteria I mentioned earlier, which of course the board will use in their assessment and which will be done on a case-by-case basis. So if you can provide information on the sustainability of the project outcome, performance targets to measure progress, whether the project intervention is in one or more instrument, etc. So a little bit more narrative around it, which will provide the board some more guidance on the project itself. Then we have other project considerations. So again, this is, as you will see in the project guidelines that we've prepared, there's a list of other project considerations, including gender considerations. And then we'd also like you to address whether there is sectoral involvement or coverage in the project, whether it's through which sector, whether it's agriculture, environment, health, labor, industry, or any other sectors, and you can provide then further information. This brings us to then project application form 3, which is a project document. This is the first sheet on that Excel sheet, as you will see. And here we'd like you to list the government's cash contributions or in-kind support. And again, as I mentioned, in-kind support or co-funding can include, for example, time of salaried civil servants, equipment, material, office space, professional services, etc. And this is where we would then address that 25% of co-funding or in-kind contributions required in accordance with the terms of reference of the special program. Here is a summary of the project budget, and I'll walk you through the specifics of the project budget. So Table A, we will have personnel and training costs. We have possibility to include staff time for project personnel or consultants. We also have a section here on independent monitoring evaluation for group training, etc. As mentioned in budget table A, the totals are calculated automatically. So please, if you are putting on a yearly basis, annual basis, this will total up and then also be related to the summary table on the first Excel sheet. And we'd like you to separate each cost on a different line. So if, say, your project personnel costs for year 1 is X dollars, and likewise for 2 or 3. So rather than doing up the total, we'd like you to address how much the personnel cost would be for each year. Which then brings us to budget table B, which is equipment and related expenses. So we have expendable equipment items under $1,500 each, and also non-expendable equipment, which is above $1,500. We have the rental, operation, maintenance of equipment, reporting costs, etc. And finally, budget table C on subcontracts. We have contracts that could be established with cooperating agencies, intergovernmental organizations, with supporting organizations, NGOs, academics, and commercial purposes, companies or profit-making entities. So that brings us to the end of the presentation and walkthrough of the project forms. And if there's any other questions, I'm happy to try and respond to them as appropriate. So from Ronnie, we have a comment. In the case of Sierra Leone, the implementing body could most appropriately be the Environment Agency with collaboration from the Ministry of Health, as well as the Ministry of Environment and other relevant ministry. If the agency executes the project, is it destined for a more greater success? So what we have seen in the case of the Quick Start program under SICAM and other different fora is it's projects that have multiple stakeholders. Of course, with chemicals and waste management, the health sector and ministry, other sectors' involvement is very important. Of course, each project does need one focal point in terms of coordination and cooperation and bringing all the stakeholders together. So Ronnie, I don't think I could respond to say which one would be better or which one would have more success. I think this will be really determined at the national level in terms of who has the ability to coordinate, whether it's through your environment agency or if it's through any of your other ministries. So I would really leave that up to each national entity to decide which is the most appropriate organization or body or ministry to execute the project. I cannot hear anything at the moment.
Hello, everybody. This is Frank Moser speaking. Sorry, I speak on behalf of Nalini and Ronnie. This is a great question, in fact, and I just want to pick up on that. One thing, maybe just to look, and this is also very general comment, but as we have gone through all of us through a synergies process in the Chemicals and Waste Conventions under the Basel, Rotterdam, and Stockholm Conventions, countries have responded by establishing interagency, interministerial coordination mechanisms. And I think that's maybe a very good first start to look into who should be involved and who has the ability to coordinate. I thought I should add this from the BS point of view. Apologies, I tried with my headphone, which didn't work. So on behalf of Nalini, okay, thank you.
So thank you everyone who participated in this webinar. As mentioned by Dan, we will be having some other sessions to provide the same information, and you're most welcome to attend in case you have any further questions or need clarification. As Dan mentioned, please feel free to also contact us at the email address that's provided on the screen. If you have any specific questions or comments or need for clarification during this period up till the 4th of July. Thank you very much again, and have a nice morning, afternoon, depending on where you are. Goodbye.